Hey guys, welcome to Easy Garage. My name is Fred. I am a heavy equipment mechanic, as you can tell by the background, but I still do small engine stuff every now and then. Today we're going to be replacing a cylinder in my MS290. It's a good chainsaw. Bought it from my neighbor. I do like these chainsaws. They are probably one of the better chainsaws that STIHL ever made. Thing is, well, like I said, it needs a cylinder. How do I know it needs a cylinder? Because I shouldn't be able to do this. It's not holding any sort of compression at all. And this is pretty much the case for any kind of chainsaw that you would go after. Doesn't matter what brand it is. So, well, I guess let's get started. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to take off the guide bar. And to do that, you need a 19mm socket. For those that don't know, we'll be taking off those two nuts right there. That takes off the cover, and then we can take off the bar. And what I was going to show you guys before the bar so rudely decided to take itself off was that there's a little adjustment bolt right there. That's your bar adjustment. It just moves this little shaft back and forth to make it tighter or looser. Next thing we're going to do, take the air filter cover off, take this housing off. We're going to get the carburetor and all that jazz off. We're going to set it all aside. And for those that don't know, you just twist it this way. It comes right off. Now these little nuts that hold the carburetor on, actually first things first, I'm going to get this rod out of the way. This is your throttle rod. So, should give you a little bit of a close-up there. You see the throttle rod moving. So what you want to do is you go to wide open throttle, take your screwdriver, and you should just be able to pop it right out if you can get some leverage on it. Throttle rod. You need an 8mm socket to take these nuts off. Then there's this little plate that goes right there, or that retains the carburetor to the machine. Alright, so next thing's next. We're going to take the carburetor out of the machine. Now ideally, before I start do this, you do want to check and make sure you don't have any fuel in the system. But at the same time, I'm fairly certain I already, yeah, mine's empty. So the trick with this guy is this little rubber boot right here. It's just a guide for the adjustment screws. Wants to come out with it because they are stuck together. And then I also forgot this little breather, tank breather, is also attached to it, so you can just push that out the back. detach it. Try and get the carburetor out a bit more. There should be this piece of hose right there. I don't know if you can see it very well. You see that brass fitting? That's your fuel inlet hose, supply hose, whatever you want to call it. Just gotta press that apart. Carburetor is out of the machine. And this carburetor is not going to be reused because it has brass fittings. I bought a new carburetor for it as well. So we're just going to set this aside. Make sure you hold on to this rubber piece. You are going to need it. And actually, I'm almost certain you are going to need this little rubber piece at the top of the carburetor too. All this piece is for is it's a direct connection to the other side of the pump diaphragm, or the metering diaphragm at the top of the carburetor. Never entirely understood what it was for, but it's there. And you do want it because the back of the air filter, that's where it would fit onto. You don't want anything to get in there, just in case. Now, we're going to take our control rod out. First things first, we need to get our kill wire away from the control rod, which, pull that through there, and there that is, hanging out all nice and free now. Now you should be able to lift the control rod out of its slot. And there that is. Set it aside as well. Alright. So next thing, well, I'll save that for a minute. The next thing that I am going to do is we're going to take the starter off. And to do that, you're going to need a T27 Torx bit because, well, STIHL really likes T27 Torx bolts. And to do that, I have this nice new T-handle. I'm just going to remove them real quick. Just move that aside. Pops right off. I'm going to set that aside as we will be reusing that, obviously. Okay, so right here I was deciding what to do next because I'm a dum-dum, and I also didn't explain that I was going to remove the plugs for the anti-vibration system in order to access the bolts for the main handle. So we're going to skip ahead to that. See, just a little plug, and a pain in the ass. Alright, I'm stopping here as well because over the next 10 minutes or so I was dealing with the fact that I smashed my thumb on the wood dog on the front of the saw there, and I may have created some new words. Don't worry, I'll show you what it looks like later in the video at a terrible angle, and I'm removing the wood dog before anything else happens. Yeah. Careful with these things, guys. They're nasty. Not the first time I've stabbed something on one. Okay, so I seriously struggled with that bushing for another few minutes. Don't worry, though, I'm a professional. Skipping ahead now. Got it. Go in there. All right. Okay. Make sure I didn't miss any bolts or covers. I think we're good. So now there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 screws to take out for this anti-vibration bar handle. That's what AV stands for, anti-vibration. All right. AV handle off. Don't drop all your bolts. Oh, wait, that's right. That's in there. Okay, we're getting somewhere now. I don't think I need to take the brake off. Of course, I say that, and I probably will need to. Here. One more plug. Hopefully this one won't be a doozy. Huh. Well, that was a pleasant surprise. Okay, so in this next part, I was interrupted by a slamming door and a coworker, so I'm skipping ahead to the brake removal. Basically, what I will be doing is removing the brake handle, the brake component cover, and the internal brake components. Obviously, not necessarily in that order. However, before I do that, I will be showing how the brake components are put together, since they can definitely look a lot more complicated than they are. Trust me, it is a much simpler brake system than you think it is. before I do this, for those of you who've never seen it before. So here's your brake assembly. There's a band that goes around the clutch there, and that's what, well, that's what stops the chain when you need it to. So there it is disengaged, there it is engaged. Springs of any size. Alright. Now the last thing I'm going to take off here, because I don't want to disassemble the entire assembly unless I absolutely have to, is just this little bar. That little bar right there on the lever, and it's just held in by an E-clip, and over here it's just a little slide lock. That E-clip you can just remove with a small screwdriver. You want to try not to lose it. It's tiny. Come on, there you go. Alright. Got away with just doing that. Throw that back there. Throw that in there. And we'll set this. Alright, so on this part, and in my oh-so-professional / non-existent way of commentating while I work, I am removing the cylinder cover / throttle control handle for the machine. Bushings are, once again, the enemy, and so is the intake tube and impulse hose for the carburetor, in which you will see my alter ego there, and the video briefly point to after pushing the intake tube through its mounting hole. It is always a struggle, I don't care who you are, to get that impulse hose through that little hole. So now, maybe I can... No? Alright. Different approach, because we need to take this off anyways. We're going to take off the muffler, and that's just another 8. You're just going to use your 8mm socket. Remove these 3 nuts here. Alright, so just so you can see it, there's this little plate that comes off first. Right behind that is a spark arrestor, which is just a little steel wire, almost like the little wire mesh in your screen door. And this is important. You don't want to lose it. Make sure it's clean, all that jazz. A lot of states, they make sure that you have a spark arrestor, otherwise you can't cut and you can get in a lot of trouble without having one of these. pull the muffler the rest of the way off. Set that aside. Set these pieces together. Set the washers and the nuts over here in my tray. And moving on. We can see the cylinder. Well, I don't know how well you can see that, but we can see inside it. Alright. So, next step now.
And right here is the final stretch for the cover. One more bushing and moving the kill wire as well as whatever else surrounds the carburetor out of the way, and the cover comes off. And also a short explanation of how the kill wire works, even though I was technically working on a different wire.
So I say kill wire because that's not per se a kill wire, but it all goes to the same deal here, your little coil, and it's just another wire that runs through there, probably just to ground everything out. Actually, definitely to ground everything out, so that way it cuts the spark, which kills the chainsaw when you need it to. Come on there, bud. Alright. Wire out of there. And last but not least, before we take this cover off, because we do have to kind of snake it through. There's a little grommet there. Sorry. There's a little grommet there that holds both the wires in place. And then of course there's the tank breather you just got to remove from the hose. Tank breather, pop right off. What I like to make sure is just suck a little bit through it. You know, put it, I know it sounds gross, but put it up to your mouth, suck through it, make sure it's working properly. If you get a little bit of suction coming out, it's working properly. If not, well, then it's time to replace it. And you should not be able to blow through this. This is a one-way valve. And this one is still working properly. Alright, let's get that grommet out of there. Get these wires back through here. Alright, should just be able to pull it off now. Hopefully. There we go. I'll get caught up there. And there is the cover off. I will be cleaning all of these up when this thing goes back together. And we're that much closer to the cylinder. Alright. Oh yeah, the studs for the exhaust, they just slide right out the side here. Well, this one will because it's free, and so will this one. This one has this cover in the way, which is just held in by a couple of little bolts.
Okay, so obviously after removing the final cover, I'll remove the last muffler stud there and set them all aside. There is a nice little stopper tool that I'm using there that STIHL makes that goes inside the cylinder, stops the piston from rotating so you can remove and install the components that attach to the crankshaft. Really, the only two components there are the flywheel and the clutch. Really, you could probably get away with using a piece of hard plastic that isn't on the verge of shattering to stop the piston, so long as it fits in the spark plug hole, so that way you can take it back out. Speaking of which, I cut out the part where I was struggling to find the correct size socket for the spark plug. I'm not smart. You can't make me. So on this part here, I didn't realize that the little clutch puller would not work on this particular saw, since the bolts were too big for the holes, plus the holes were not threaded. So I had to resort to something a little bit more barbaric. What can I say? Pry bar saves the day, plus that cylinder is the one getting replaced anyways. So coming up here, we're going to do a shirt change since my battery ran out, and I will be removing the clutch next. Also, I'm letting Alter Ego speak for a moment again.
Hey guys, sorry about that. My battery died a couple of days ago, so I, I, I knew I'd get back to it eventually, but I'm going to continue on from where we left off. See, my thumb is a little bit better than it was, so um, where we left off last time, I was just about to take off the clutch and the clutch drum. So we're going to start by taking off the clutch and clutch drum, and then we're going to clean this guy because I don't want any of that getting anywhere near the new piston and cylinder if I can help it. So let's get started.
So the clutch is pretty straightforward. Just remove the E-clip, the washer, and then the drum. Not as easy as it looks when a ton of debris gets built up back there, but it is still doable. Also, it's made much easier by removing the brake bands so you can get behind it with a screwdriver. Yeah, nice and gross. It's a little hard to see, but there is a small amount of buildup around the edges there that was grabbing onto the back of the clutch. Kind of like when you try to remove a worn brake drum on a truck. So right there is the sprocket. You can see where the wear pattern is for the chain drivers. That is not bad. So it still has a fair bit of life left, and I will be reusing that drum. And there is the clutch in all its dirty glory. So the clutch uses left-hand threads, so it's actually righty-loosey, lefty-tighty, so keep that in mind when you get to yours. You'll see the fight that it puts up here pretty soon. And just an FYI, on all the chainsaws that I've touched, they follow that rule, but that doesn't mean there isn't that one weird one out there that has regular threads for the clutch, so approach that with caution. And also that little needle bearing on the shaft on the front of the clutch, you can reuse it or just replace it. I've never had an issue with those unless they're just rusted or completely torn up, so I'll leave that to your discernment. So after the clutch comes off, double check the springs around it. So this is what is called a centrifugal clutch. In other words, the faster it spins, the more it grips into the drum, which is why the saw chain spins at full throttle and doesn't move at idle. If any of those springs are broken, the chain will move at idle, or it will move while you're pulling the ripcord. So right here, I'm removing the oil pump, and that really just consists of the worm gear and the pump assembly. So the worm gear is the little white gear there with the handle on it that will allow it to spin the oil pump itself, which I'll show you here in a minute. It's just a straight gear that is spun by the worm gear, which is spun by the clutch, which is spun by the engine. Clear as mud? Good. The worm gear just pulls right out, and the pump is held in by two screws. Now there is a little hose and a plastic fitting on the pump, so after you push the hose down, you just need to rotate the pump assembly out a little bit to detach it from the outlet fitting on the housing. And the outlet fitting, aka the plastic fitting, on the pump, well, it will come with the pump. Alright, so there's the straight gear and the pump. And that is most likely connected to a tiny impeller that sucks the oil up and then pushes it through the plastic fitting right above the inlet there. And right there on the saw itself is where the oil gets sent out to the guide bar to keep the chain lubricated. Also, I'm going to let Alter Ego chime in again because, well, he made a small blunder. It won't be the first one in this video.
That's all taken care of. Oh, there's an O-ring right there. Well, I'll be ordering a new part. I kind of hope we have that O-ring in stock. Huh. So I don't ever, and none of us, there's not a mechanic alive that would ever recommend reusing an O-ring, seal, gasket, unless you're in dire straits and just need to get something done. But since I want to fix this properly, it is my chainsaw. I did buy it. I want it repaired properly so it'll give me a nice long service life. I will be doing this. So I will be seeing if that O-ring is available. If not, I will be ordering it. I should say if the guys up front have it in stock, I will be ordering it, and we'll continue on from there.
Alright, finally the part that everybody has been waiting for. Cylinder removal and disassembly. And for those that may have noticed, I went ahead and cleaned up the other parts off camera and got them all organized. So the cylinder removal is pretty straightforward. Just need to remove the 4 screws on the bottom and one of the bar nut studs, although I didn't know right away that I needed to remove one of the bar nut studs. And it figures that I would have to remove the ignition coil, but there it is, finally out of the case. The case will of course be receiving some much needed cleaning, but next I am going to disassemble the cylinder assembly, which is just the little bottom pan and the cylinder itself, and rotating the assembly, and the rotating assembly.
There it is. Our cute little crankshaft, connecting rod, and piston. As you can see, I mean, the carbon buildup's pretty normal. There is a very, I don't know how well you guys are going to be able to see this. There is a very minute amount of scoring damage. And you can kind of tell mostly on this side by the condition of the piston rings. But it's not as bad as I thought it was, but it's obviously just enough to where it's no longer getting any compression. Let me get a flashlight. Alright, once again, I don't know how well you're going to be able to see this, but right down here, I'm going to try and get this as angled as best I can. So, right there where I'm pointing the light is where the scoring is. I'll see if I can't put a picture in the video and get hopefully a closer look at it. But it's once again just enough to where it is no longer providing any sort of compression. And it's actually mostly the piston ring's fault because the cylinder would be passable. But that top piston ring is just, it's done. Even if we were managing to start it, it wouldn't hold anything for very long. So I'm gonna go clean all this stuff up. I'll be right back and we'll get to reassembly here.
Okay, so I cleaned up everything, as you can see. These are the parts that I will be replacing. And these are the parts that will be reused. I know it can be kind of shocking to see just how many parts are in something this small for the first time. So for the final part of this assembly, I am going to remove the piston from the connecting rod and the bearings from the crankshaft. So that right there is one of the tiny circlips that hold the wrist pin in place and keeps the piston from walking back and forth across it. I like to keep these temporarily just in case I lose one since, well, they're tiny. For the record, these wrist pins are never any fun to remove. And that right there is the little needle bearing that sits in between the connecting rod and the wrist pin. It's really just a little extra buffer to help keep the pin and rod from marrying each other, since this is a two-stroke engine and lubrication is done solely through the fuel and oil mixture. Now, just like all bearings, you want to inspect it, although I have never had an issue with one, just like the one on the crankshaft for the clutch drum. It doesn't hurt to check, but I will be reusing this one. I will not be reusing those seals, and you shouldn't either. Now on to the last blunder, of which Alter Ego will explain.
One last thing to do, there's a bearing on each side of the crankshaft here, and I had a bad feeling about that and I didn't even think about getting any. So we're gonna have to wait a little bit longer till I can get these. Hopefully they have these in stock up front, but we'll have to continue this next time. But the way that you would tell that these are bad, if you can spin it and it sounds like it's starting to grind, or it's making this really bad airy sound, or like this one, it just doesn't want to spin without some major force behind it, and you can clearly hear that it's starting to grind, that's when we know it's bad. So I'm gonna get some new bearings. We'll get these off, get them pressed on, and continue next time.
So I was trying to be slick right here and not break out my bearing puller, but I will give you a good idea as to how hard pressed these bearings were on the crankshaft. is a 47-ounce dead blow hammer, and I was not being ginger with it, as you saw the camera sliding away while I smacked it. Now I ultimately broke out the bearing puller and had zero issues removing the bearings from the crankshaft. But yeah, they were on there. So I'm going to end the video here as it's almost an hour long. We'll start into reassembly next time.
Thank you guys. We'll see you in the next one.